your what we done started. Look at what we done started. This the people party.
Peace and love, party people, in a place to be. Of course, it's the one and only Talib Kweli, the host of the world's best podcast, The People's Party. And I got the world's best co-host representing lovely in the flesh. Well, in the flesh where she's at, but on Zoom for the rest of us is Jasmin Leigh in the place to be. What up, Jasmin? How you feeling?
What up, what up? I'm feeling great. Just finished my coffee and I'm ready to roll.
Are you fully caffeinated, huh?
I'm fully caffeinated.
Well, Jasmin, today I have a story to tell.
Yes.
And the story to tell is the story about our guest today, who is regarded as one of the best mixtape DJs, period. One of the best tour DJs, period. He is responsible for more than 40 mixtapes, including the historic Lauryn Hill mixtapes, Fire and Water, The Abstract with Q-Tip, Best of Nas, the Hamilton mixtapes, Rise Up, James Brown mixtapes. He's been a tour DJ for Lauryn Hill, for The Roots, for Q-Tip, for Black Thought. He is part of the Kennedy Center's Hip Hop Cultural Council. He's performed at the Smithsonian and at TED. Welcome to my TED Talk. Rolling Stone called this man a music guru. Questlove said he's the most creative mixtape producer of all time. He's got an album out right now called Story to Tell, featuring Dave Chappelle, Black Thought, Lin-Manuel Miranda, and more. He's worked with legends from Common to Kanye to Mary J. Blige, John Legend. He's worked with the NBA and created a much praised soundscape for our beloved Brooklyn Nets. He's been a key collaborator for me over the years. I am fortunate to call this man my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, J.Period is in the place to be on the People's Party.
Wow.
Let's go.
Period.
Wow, that's quite an introduction, man.
Period.
I appreciate that.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, you've earned it, and it's indeed my honor and my pleasure to know you and to work with you.
Word up.
And welcome to the People's Party.
Thank you, man. I'm glad to be here. This is my favorite podcast. So,
Yay.
Dope. We haven't had as many DJs on this show as I wanted to have. We have Stretch and Bob. We have Clark Kent. Who else we have DJ wise? Manny Fresh. I think it can count as a DJ. Diamond D. But it's great to have another DJ on the show. J.Period, your story is a story of ambition and relationships. You were a kid from outside of the culture who utilized friendships and a desire to make relationships paired with an immense hustle to build an incredible life for yourself and to ingratiate yourself in this hip hop culture. Most Def Yasin Bey says the survival mathematics is 10% condition, 90% response. I feel like you embody that. And some artists are 90% talent and 10% hustle, and some artists are 90% hustle and 10% talent. Where do you fall on that spectrum?
man, I think that's difficult for me to gauge. I would definitely say I'm 90% hustle, no matter what the equation is.
I like that.
So, I think I would leave it to other people to say what my talent level is. I think I definitely have a talent for observing and absorbing. And I think that, over the years, my love of this thing, I wouldn't even say it's ambition, because I never had designs on a level that I was trying to get to. I just wanted to be closer to this thing. It's been a love affair with this culture since, the moment of discovery. And I'm still here. And I feel honored to get to be, mentioned in the sentence with a lot of the folks that you just said. So, it's a privilege for sure. And a lot of hard work, no doubt.
No doubt.
Yes, I love that. Humbly, I'm going to let everyone else tell me what percentage of talent I am. Because usually we get people in here like, I'm 100% talent and 100% hustle. But I feel like you have to have that mentality too. But I don't think that even people who love rap and think they know hip hop fully understand how mixtapes work. The money flow, the rights, the sign-offs. Can you break down for people what you define as a mixtape?
Man, well, I think the definition has changed so much over time. I think the landscape has changed so much over time. When I came up, a mixtape was just the best place to hear the best songs. So, I discovered a lot of records through mixtapes. When I came to it, there was something that happened in those first days where I was in a listening session. I've told this story many times, but I was in a listening session for Godson, for Nas, and he was telling his story. And I just thought how ill it would be to take that story and combine it with his music. And that was sort of the seed for what, would become my style. So, it was after I made that mixtape, again, just because I wanted to, that a couple friends of mine hit me and they were like, yo, your tape is getting bootlegged on Canal Street. Here's what you do. And it was, press up as many as you can carry, go down to Fulton Street and Canal Street and sell them, to the vendors there. And that was kind of the first step. A couple Saturdays, I got rid of 200, as many as I could carry.
Wow.
And that was sort of the beginning. So I learned sort of this whole street culture around mixtapes by doing and by going out and selling to the, the vendors on Canal Street and Fulton Street and really learning the game like that. Over the course of that time, it evolved. So then some of the mixtapes made their way into labels, and I would get asked by the label, they'd hold up the Lauryn Hill and say, can you do this for our artist? And so then I was in a system where I was getting hired to do these things by the label, but then there's a conflict inside the label between the legal department and the marketing department over, how these things can be distributed.
Right.
And it's all just changed so much. The fact that we're doing mixtapes at the Kennedy Center now is a testament to how far we've come from those days. And I've definitely seen every phase of that development in my time doing this.
Now it's like people look forward to the mixtapes as much as they look forward to the actual albums.
For sure. And I think the real truth is that the listening audience today doesn't know the difference. They don't have to go and chase it down. You would have had to go to Canal Street to get those mixtapes back then. I think now everyone is sort of going to a few places, and if it's not there, they don't see it. They don't know about it. So we've made, efforts to take some of the mixtapes and put them into those platforms. We did a partnership with Apple last year that got the Lauryn Hill mixtape into streaming services. We've been working for years for some of these. I won't be happy until all of them are available everywhere. But it takes people understanding the value of these things, I think, first. So that's been one of my missions.
Yeah, I think you understand your value very much. So your website is really fresh. Like your website is very clean. It's very clear and evident where you can get the music, how you can hear it. Within 2 or 3 clicks, I'm 2 or 3 clicks away from music at any time on your website. And your new album how did you put it? Did you use Bandcamp?
No, the album, we actually did a distribution deal with BMG.
Okay.
So this is sort of my first, real project in that way. And
Right.
we have major label distributions through BMG and E1.
Okay.
And so that's been helping take it to a whole other level. But, I always wanted all my music to be available everywhere.
Everywhere.
So, it's on my site, it's on Bandcamp. Part of the deal that we did was so that I could continue to do the things I've been doing that people love. And I think that that's something that some artists get away from when they kind of get to a certain level. But the way things work now, you just want people to hear what you're doing.
Right.
And it translates, I think, in some other way.
One of the first things you and I did together was way back in 2009. We worked on a Nneka Heartbeat remix. Such an exciting, powerful artist, Nigerian artist living in Europe at the time. What made you want to work with her? How did you link up with her, and how did you think to include me on that project?
Honestly, Nneka, I've always been attracted to artists that I've never heard of, where the second you hear them, you're like, who is that? And Nneka has one of those voices. I think I was originally approached by her label. I think it was Decon at the time. And shout to, Peter Bittenbender and the whole Mass Appeal family. But as soon as I heard her, I was captivated, and she told me her influences were Bjork and Mobb Deep. And I was like, you and I are going to get along great.
Yeah.
So, that was the seed. And she had a little bit of what, the first group I toured with is still friends of mine to this day, Zion I. They combined drum and bass and hip hop. And, the record that she had, Heartbeat, which I ended up, remixing with UPROXX, it had a little bit of that flavor. And I just felt like there's a sort of global approach, politically or otherwise, to your message that felt like it fit and translates, in a similar way to that WizKid Biggie remix we were talking about a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I chose to combine you guys together on that.
Yeah, I was challenged by that because, like you said, it had a little bit of the drum and bass, so it challenged me not just intellectually. She's a very African-minded artist, which was great. I was attracted to that, but also just flow-wise, I was able to do different things. I can almost trace my growth as a rapper through working with you. It's like you've always been like right there. Ambitions. I did that with you. Doing a Tupac song over was exciting for me. My verses on The Traveler, working on that. The Heartbeat song. Youthful with Questlove, being able to repurpose the Tribe Called Quest song. On The Traveler, I was able to rap about Lemony Snicket. You know what I'm saying? My verse from Youthful, I used them back again with High Tech. On Ambitious, I'm talking about starting Javoti on that record. I'm talking about that, but I sound nervous even when I'm talking about it on that record. How would you describe our working relationship over all these years?
Man, I think I got a window into why it's worked so well over these years when I heard that story of you trying to get Common on the Respiration record, which
Right.
I think people will hear in time. But I think it starts from you kind of being a fan and perpetually trying to raise your level as well. I think it's crazy that there's that alignment over the course of your career with what I've done. But I think it's funny to me, you sort of stand in sort of the family of A Tribe Called Quest and those artists that were my favorite artists. So it was always a privilege to me to work with you, work with Mos, work with any of those artists who inspired me initially. It was a discovery for me to find out you were not always part of that circle.
Right.
That you had to rise through the ranks in that way as well. So I think it was a funny realization that we have that in common, because I never would have known that had I not gotten to know you. But I think it's been over many years. It's true.
Everyone always has to rise. From the outside looking in, it looks like people just popped up and they were there, but so much hard work behind the scenes. You were born in LA and then relocated to New York, and now because of who you've collaborated with and because of your work with the Brooklyn Nets, you're associated with BK. Why did you move to New York, Brooklyn in particular, and how has that shaped your career?
Man, when I was a kid, I discovered Beat Street first, and
The movie?
I saw the movie.
Okay.
And I saw this universe in Beat Street that I was fascinated with. I spoke to Cypher Sounds and Peter Rosenberg a couple weeks ago.
Oh, we had Cypher Sounds as a DJ on our show.
Yes,
Shout out
we
to
did.
Cypher
Oh,
Sounds.
So,
Yeah.
Syph had this sort of realization that he was like, as a kid coming from LA to see the burned out Bronx, it must have looked like another world to you. Like you'd never seen anything like that. And I was thinking about, I was like, that's really true. There was something that was fascinating about the sort of destruction and this beautiful music and this beautiful art that just caught me. And from that moment on, I wanted to be closer to it. So I think as soon as I had an opportunity to move to New York and to Brooklyn, I wanted, to jump right in. And, my favorite rappers were Biggie and Nas and Tribe, like I said. So there was something about Brooklyn that just drew me in, and it felt similar. I spent a lot of time in Oakland. Brooklyn really feels a lot like Oakland.
Absolutely.
In a lot of ways. So it felt like I was at home there. And there was just this really interesting mixture of people. And Brooklyn has become a part of me in a way where I've lived in Brooklyn as long as I lived in LA, growing up. So I'm proud to, be part Brooklynite.
Yeah, but you still have your LA roots very strong. I mean, your first single off this project, Dave Chappelle, Black Thought, Tiffany Goucher, it's very much LA artist, young up and coming artist that's really, really making a name for herself. But production wise, right? You're leaning into your production bag more. And you work with classic LA people like Tiffany, like DJ Khalil, who's like an incredible, doesn't get his props for what he brings to the game. 1500 and nothing. Those guys. You know what I'm saying? Like, is your connection with those guys from being from LA?
To be honest, no. I mean, in a roundabout way, my connection to Khalil, because I grew up with Chase Infinite, actually, from the time I was 13, 14.
Shout out to Chase Infinite.
Yeah, shout out to Chase
Self-scientific. Come on.
Yes, indeed. But I didn't meet Khalil then. I met Khalil later through Jazzy Jeff and the Playlist Retreat.
Okay.
I met Tiffany through Jazzy Jeff and the Playlist Retreat.
Tell us about the playlist retreat real quick. Describe
Well,
that.
yeah. So, for Jeff's, I think it was his 50th birthday. He had a couple DJs there, and the day after we were trading MP3s and just talking about how amazing it was to be together like that, and said, wouldn't it be amazing if we got together like this once a year? That went into Jeff's mind, and the next year, the Playlist Retreat came out, which was this gathering of creatives where he just wanted to put us in a room together to sort of inspire each other and collaborate. And I mean, it worked beyond measure, like Stro Elliott I met there. He's on almost every track on my album. Tall Black Guy.
So ill.
So many ill, just alien level talents. And Jeff really encouraged us to collaborate. And I took that to heart. So I would take that ethos out of the retreat, go to LA, collaborate with the guys and girls that I had met through the retreat out there. I will go to Omos Keith's studio. He's another artist that I work with out there. 1500, I met
Omos
literally just looking for a studio, and I ended up in Inglewood. And it was like 5 days of me playing my beats that Rance popped his head, and he's like, "Okay, who are you?" Like what? And we just hit it off. So he's become one of my closest friends in this game. And it's not even because I grew up in LA. I think it's just, again, through this sort of love of the culture. But I definitely have roots in LA. And, I think a lot about moving back out there for that reason. But I took this mission to make this album all over the country. I took it to LA, took it to Chicago in search of, the best musicians and wherever inspiration could be found.
Right. Because you're working with some of the best producers working right now. Right now, where is most of your focus and emphasis? Is it on DJing, making original beats, remixes, mixtapes? Like, where's your focus?
I mean, I think right now, my focus is really on this album. I've been for years telling other people's stories through these mixtapes, and this is my opportunity sort of to tell my story in a roundabout way. It's not, biographical, but there's a lot of me in the album. There's 2 more chapters that are coming very soon that I'm working on finishing. There's a podcast that will remain nameless that I'm putting some man hours in on as well.
Oh no, we could tell people about the Midnight Miracle.
Well, we certainly can.
Yes.
I mean, folks don't know.
Okay.
I've been putting in some time on the Midnight Miracle.
Yes.
Really, really excited about it.
Yes.
Another opportunity to sort of tell stories with music for me. So I think it's a combination of things. Part of it is this album and that story. Another part of it is continuing to DJ. I do these live mixtapes. During the pandemic, I got inspired by Jazzy Jeff to pick it up, every week and do a live mixtape. And that turned into a whole thing for me. It was really a way to connect. So, I'm trying to do all of it. There's no stopping now. I've laid out the path.
No doubt.
So we're doing as much as possible.
Talib, would Midnight Miracle be considered our sister podcast? Is that correct in saying that?
Sister, cousin, yes, it's the same family. It's all on Luminary. It's all family.
First cousin?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. All right, cool. First cousins. J.Period, how did you meet and start working with Young Guru? And how would you say your various collaborations tend to come about?
The funny thing about the collaborations is that in some ways I feel like I've been working my whole career building these collaborations and these relationships. For years, it was just giving out mixtapes and not really asking for anything. And if I would return back and you remember that mixtape, then, we had something to talk about. And, guys like Guru, I met multiple times and just kind of nodded at each other and showed him respect. And then eventually through Jeff again, we got time to really spend quality time together. And he's become one of my closest friends as well, where I did a project in 2017 to 2019 called the Rise Up Project, where Young Guru and I came together to sort of make almost like a modern day Stop the Violence type of project. And through that, we really bonded as well.
Rise Up is a very important part of your catalog. Can you tell us more about, you were inspired by Philando Castile and Alton Sterling, right?
Yeah, so, in the weeks after Alton Sterling and Philando Castile, I think a lot of us were feeling like we wanted to do something and not knowing what to do. And I called Ralph McDaniels and I said, tell me the story of Stop the Violence movement. Like, I want to know how that came to be. And he told me the story, and I took that and I called Guru and I said, here's what Ralph just said. What do you think about doing this together? And, you know, at that point, it was just an idea. I had been working on a show called America Divided, where it's like
That was
Jesse Williams,
Shonda Rhimes.
Oh, shout out Shonda Rhimes.
yeah, and Norman Lear, Jesse Williams, a lot of amazing artists, and through that, I'd met the folks at the Kellogg Foundation. We do a lot of incredible work in sort of racial justice and equity, and I brought this idea to them just to say, if this were to benefit a charity, what would you recommend? And they said, well, we can do better than that. We actually, if you propose it properly, could maybe fund the project. And so I ended up going around the record labels and getting the Kellogg Foundation to fund this project. And it took us about a year and a half to make the album. We went and did shows, bussed in 500 kids to the Kennedy Center, to BAM. We did this huge spoken word poetry festival in Chicago, all just to bring kids together around these issues and use music to inspire conversation. And it was amazing. I mean, it really, really created incredible relationships. The kids were inspired, and the music that came out of it was great. So it was definitely an important project for me to go through.
Yeah, man, definitely shout out to Young Guru. Such a good dude. He makes my last solo album, Radio Silence. Now, you obviously get a lot of props and attention for the way that you chop in the dialogue, and you told us the story about the Nas Godson experience, the audio recordings, interviews, voiceovers. You really lean into that on Story to Tell. Now you're creating worlds, not just documenting worlds that exist, right? But creating new worlds. Earlier when we were setting up the equipment to record, you started telling Steve, our director, about where your inspiration for this audio biography came from. So can you share that with us?
Well, yeah, I it was show and tell, because I have here some of the original book and record sets, and you know, I came up on these as a kid. I really do still have the ones from you know, and it was sort of, you know,
I had that.
Yeah, when you hear this sound, turn the page.
Yeah.
And, you know, as I was imagining what my album could become, I started thinking about that and going back to it. And I just thought it would make an amazing sort of blueprint for this idea. But the problem was I didn't necessarily know what the stories were going to be. I didn't know what the songs were going to be. So my first mission, you know, when I make the mixtapes, I kind of lay my puzzle pieces out and then I assemble them. So the challenge of this was I had to make the puzzle pieces first. And, you know, when I've told this story before, but like when I sit down by myself to make beats, I make my best approximation of Mobb Deep beats. Like that's my soul language.
That's what you're going for, right?
Yeah. But when I collaborated with artists, I found that the direction would veer off from what I wanted to what the energy in the room wanted. And it took me into these places where my album became different things everywhere I went. And I thought, well, that's amazing, because that's my story as a DJ. I'm going to have all these different influences culturally and musically. And out of that, the story started to come together. And once I felt like I could see it piecing together, I started bringing in, you know, Jamel Hill. I have this basketball game with me and Masego. Can you be the courtside reporter? And, you know, and wrote the script out for her. You know, with Dave, it was like, well, you know, who can I get that would be the ultimate storyteller to help me tell my story? And I pitched Dave Chappelle this idea, and he's like, I love it. Let's do it. And it was like, you know, it was that simple.
Right.
And it took time, obviously, and patience, and a trip, you know, a 9-hour drive to Yellow Springs.
Shout out to Yellow Springs.
Indeed. But that's kind of how it's come together, and it's far exceeded what I could have imagined. I think I just sort of had it in my mind. That's what I'm making. And I put my head down and have been going. And now I look up and I'm like, wow, you know, we actually did it. So,
Right.
Yeah.
I was just going to shout out Jamel Hill. She was like one of our first people we had on the show.
She was.
Yeah. And low key, you know, in my album, like I said, I'm telling my story, but not directly. So I'm sort of telling it through other storytellers and people that I feel like represent important parts of the culture. And Jamel Hill is definitely one of those people. So I was really honored that she played a role too.
Yeah, what you know about bomba music though? What you know about the El Gran Combo?
Well, so here's the beauty of this. I didn't know about bomba en plena until Babito explained it to me.
Okay.
And he explained it on the album. You know, Gran Combo is on my album. I'm not Puerto Rican, but it's on there because it's a story of discovery for me. I used to get records delivered, every week, promo records as a DJ. And the UPS guy eventually was like, who are you? What's your deal? And I started giving him mixtapes. And after a while, he was like so appreciative of the mixtapes. He goes, I want to give you something from my upbringing. And he gives me Gran Combo.
Whoa.
And he's like, listen to this. And I
Whoa.
take it upstairs and I listened to it and I was like, whoa, like, what is this? And I heard that one sample and I looped this up probably 7-8 years ago. And I just had it on loop. And then I had this idea of, well, what if I get Joel Ortiz to kind of talk about Puerto Rico over this record? I know it's really important culturally. And it's like, again, it's like every one of these things led to another thing that winds up where the story that's told on the album is sort of this cultural history of this music, because Bobbito is the perfect guy for that.
Bobbito going heavy into his like Borica side. Like I never heard him sound that Spanish before.
he said he saw what did he say? He said I might want to get some plantain chips when he
at the bodega.
Bob to me,
I love Puerto Rico. That's why I had to mention that, and I love that music.
Shout out to my grandma.
And me too. And listen, the story of a lot of these mixtapes is me discovering the music while I'm making the mixtapes. So like I knew James Brown to a certain extent, but I dove in headlong. I learned about James Brown making that James Brown mixtape.
So let's talk about that James Brown mixtape, because that is such a fantastic mixtape. And it's like, I love what you did with Mind Power. In my book, Vibrate Higher, I talk about my first experience with really seeing colors in music was being on stage with De La Soul. And for the Stakes Is High remix, for the Stakes Is High show, and by the way, the excursions with De La Soul on that Q-Tip mixtape is amazing. I'm sure they had a lot of fun redoing that song. Shout out to Paz and Dave. When we say vibe, we want y'all to say vibrations. Stakes is high. Like saying that, repeating that on stage as a mantra was illuminating for me. And James Brown, you get deep into some of those rhythms, some of those stories. Dave Chappelle shouted out the James Brown mixtape on The Tonight Show. What made you even want to do that mixtape?
That one was a little intimidating, to be honest, because James Brown his catalog's so vast and he's so important to hip hop. But that's also what made me want to do it. It was a challenge to try to assemble that in that way. And I felt like, in my experience, there's two sides to James Brown. There's the side that makes you want to get up and it's like, I got ants in my pants and I need to dance. And then there's the side which is like the seeds and the foundation for hip hop in so many places. So I was like, all right, we're going to split this down the middle. One half is going to be that. The other half, I'm going to try to trace every single James Brown sample back to back to back to back on the second half. And, it was for the movie. Like the original folks that approached me was this marketing company.
Get On Up?
For Get On Up.
Such a great movie. Rest in peace to Chadwick Boseman.
Yes,
did a great job.
Indeed, did an amazing job. Channeled James Brown in that movie. And, again, it became an opportunity for me to dive in and pay homage to this, important piece of hip hop culture. And then as it happened, Black Thought was in the James Brown movie. And so as an additional thing, I took all the breaks from the mixtape and flipped it with Black Thought Live. So we did the live mixtape James Brown edition the night before the movie actually came out.
And shout out to Black Thought for acting in that movie too.
Yes, as Pee Wee Ellis.
As Pee Wee Ellis, that's right.
Yeah. But, the James Brown mixtape, I think, has a really special place for me because I felt like it was one I had to do. And I was scared to do it because it's like, you can't do that mixtape wrong.
Right.
I have a mixtape. My favorite artist of all time is Prince. And I'm a first poster, first album. And when Prince passed, I was given the great, great honor of DJing the block party that Spike Lee put on that night. And I decided that day I was going to make a Prince mixtape, and it would take me 7 years. I would give myself 7 years to make it. And I got 2 years left. But it's like, projects like that I feel like are a little intimidating, but the challenge makes me want to do it because the artists are so important to me. You
talk about the hustle of selling mixtapes. You had to go down and sell them to DJs and stuff, and the vendors in Canal Street. Do you know about the hustle with the mixtapes that goes on now? I'm not sure about in New York, but I know like in Hollywood Boulevard, how you're like just walking by and they're like, "Oh, is that?"
Hold on, Jazz. Let me step in here. What you're talking about? That's not what J.Period does.
Okay, that's what I was asking. Okay. I wanted clarification.
Are we talking about artists that are like listen to my music?
Yeah. Artists that are like outside of the store, like it used to be.
And they're like,
Square.
You want to?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well,
that's a respectable hustle. It's a respectable hustle.
For sure.
That's not what J.Period.
But I was just trying to see if the hustles are comparable, or if that hustle has like morphed into that, or if they're two separate hustles.
I think the hard part now is, for artists, for DJs, like my hustle can transform and turn into another kind of hustle. If you're an artist trying to sell yourself as an artist, it's like you're either anonymous in the internet world or you're hand-to-hand hustling and trying to, get your name known. So I respect it. It feels to me a little bit past its time because people don't even use physical CDs anymore. Like I throw out CDs at a concert now and they're like, what is this, a coaster? Like they don't even know what to do with it. So it's a different game for sure than it used to be. I feel privileged to have had the last tail end of that physical product era. Like I want to hold things. I make we made this mixtape and it's it's a USB.
Yeah. That's crazy. You gave me one of those.
I still think it's important to have something physical to hold, but the hustle is different for sure.
And Midnight Miracle is going to be on vinyl as well for the people who.
Oh my God! I need to get a record player now. Now I have an excuse because Midnight Miracle.
Make sure you don't get one of those cheap little record players from like Urban Outfitters or something.
Oh my God! It's exactly the one I was gonna get. So
I know.
It looks like Talib's gonna send me a record player. Then you guys heard it here first.
You was gonna get the Crossley. You could at least go to like Guitar Center or some shit.
All right. For
ask somebody, a DJ. I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was Clark. Was talking about how those record players are so cheap that they could damage your vinyl.
Oh,
like the needles on them.
That may be true.
Okay, so I'm gonna get me a non-cheap record player, and then I'm gonna listen to Midnight Miracle on that record player with all three of your autographs.
Yes.
Now back to my question. You did a couple of Outkast mixtapes, including Wakanda Forever, which had voiceovers. Forever ever. I'm a nerd.
It's all good.
Sorry, I'm a nerd. Okay, which included voiceovers from a friend you grew up with, and one of my favorite actors, Sterling K. Brown, who's from Black Panther and This Is Us.
Yes.
Though
he does a great comment impersonation on Saturday Night Live as well.
He did.
I was there for that.
He did. Okay.
I was in the audience for that.
Sterling K. Brown, come be on our show. I freaking love you.
He is an actor.
Yes.
Even though you did not grow up listening to Outkast music, the mixtape came out great. And how did that process go? And what responsibility did you feel taking on a band that's held in such an incredible regard?
I mean, I think the story of all my mixtapes is me taking on artists that I think are just amazing, historic, transcendent artists. And Outkast was one where I didn't grow up with that, but I definitely grew up with, Southern Playalistic and that, those were my joints back then. So, I think André doesn't get his due as one of the greatest MCs of all time nearly enough. And I think, something I found when I did the Lauryn Hill mixtape was that until you hear all of her verses back to back to back, you don't realize how much she's one of the best MCs ever.
Who doesn't realize?
I think people have forgotten now, but that's a different story. Even back then,
there's some sexism involved in that as well.
Yeah,
okay.
I think that's probably true to some extent, and I think also I wouldn't say she's one of the best female MCs. I would say she is one of the best MCs. Period. So André, I think I put in a similar category. So the Outkast mixtape is a crazy story because shout out to my man Sake One from Oakland. Sake was doing a tribute to Outkast party, and I did that set live. Like that Outkast mixtape was recorded live on the spot, and I made a week's worth of blends all week to build up to it, to put André and Big Boy in different contexts to show how ill they were, and it really came off. the Wakanda version of it, I wanted to revisit it because I couldn't really explain it. It was like it started as a joke. April Rain, who's a good friend of mine, the creator of Oscar So White, she had made a joke about Wakanda, and it was like the André meme, the Forever Ever Ever, and I was like, sounds like a great mixtape. And she like challenged me kind of to make that as a mixtape.
Right.
The more I started thinking about it, I was like, wow, that actually would be really ill. A lot of those themes go together. And as it happened, Sterling K. Brown was in, Black Panther. And so I pitched him this idea of redoing his intro from the movie, but telling the story of hip hop instead of the story of Wakanda. And Sterling is always game, and he did it, and it really came off.
It's real dope.
So the funniest part of the story with SKB is that his wife Ryan Bathe is actually the first person that ever hired me for a DJ gig.
Wow.
At Stanford University, she hired me for the Delta Sorority Black Family Gathering.
What?
That was my first ever DJ gig. And so I knew Ryan a long time ago as well, and their family, like that's all part of my family. He's had a meteoric rise is an understatement with Sterling, but he's been cheering me on the last couple weeks, which is fun.
That's dope. That's super dope. I was speaking of those Miss Hill mixtapes, Fire and Water. These are incredible mixtapes. I feel like they are going to be talked about when people talk about the history of mixtapes forever. For obvious reasons, I love how you put Lost Ones over the Definition beat. That was awesome. How did you meet her and get her to be on that?
Wow. The truth is that I actually met Rohan Marley first. I had met him out at I think it was a Mobb Deep release party. I gave him some mixtapes, and we ended up hanging out. There's something, we had a vibe. We hung out all night, and he goes to LA to move out there, I think a couple weeks later, and he just hits me up, and he's like, yo, J.Period, I need some more mixtapes. Send him some more mixtapes. And that year I was in LA once a month for a tour, and I just started kicking it with Rohan Marley, and eventually I told him about this idea. And he said, look, that's got nothing to do with me. You have to contact her directly. And I did. I reached out to her, and to be honest, she said no at first. And I sort of didn't take no for an answer. I said, with all due respect, I feel compelled to make this mixtape. And so I started scouring for materials, interviews that I could use to put it together. And it was about 6 months later that I got to meet her in person and sort of, connect up, and she gave me the drops and really made it official. But it wasn't until after I was done and she heard the mixtape, I met her brother, Mulaney, at an event called Mix Show Power Summit. And he said to me when I met him, he said, oh my God, J.Period, my sister has had your mixtape in her CD player for 3 months and won't take it out. And I just was like, so I here's my retirement papers. I'm good. I don't need to do anything else. And that was the seed of the relationship. It wasn't until about 6 months later that I was actually going out and doing stuff with her. It's been an amazing, amazing relationship over many years, and still to this day. I DJ'd her 40th birthday party with Natasha Diggs, a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And Miss Hill has been incredibly gracious and generous over the years. So I got nothing but great things to say about her.
Yeah, I've written songs and essays about Miss Hill and what people thinks that she owes her fans, which I believe is nothing. She's already given us so much. How do you feel about that?
I honestly, I think you made a statement once, I think, about your work, which was that if you buy the album, it's like that's the relationship. You're paying me for the album. I don't owe you anything as a person. And I think that gets confused a lot for artists. People get emotionally invested in their artists, and they want more and more and more. And I don't think anyone realizes what it takes from the artist.
Yeah.
So
it's a very toxic relationship. It can be.
It can be, for sure. Yeah. And I think especially with people that are on her level of talent and genius, really, they're often misunderstood. Q-Tip is elusive in some ways in that way. André, people don't know what to make of folks in that way. And I think having seen the person, I can say definitively, what an incredible person she is. And it's hard to hear rumor and innuendo and all those things, but I think there's casualties of trying to do this thing and be excellent. And it's that different people have different opinions.
Yeah, definitely.
Miss Hill's music is timeless. Like, you can literally listen to it over and over and over, and each generation is gonna be like, "Ooh, what is this?" So if she never made anything else, I'd be 100% fine with it, and I would still go to her concert.
Right. And if she doesn't show up, hey, go home and listen to the album.
I was not gonna say that part, Talib. We all know how I feel about that, but I'll still be there.
No doubt, and so will I. Jay, you and I are close to John Forte, who John Forte has had on the show. His story has been documented on this show. He went to jail, went to prison for some time, came out. He started his career with the Fugees. Before he started his career with the Fugees, me and him started our careers together. One of my best friends, one of my favorite people.
One of my favorite people.
And can I say this? I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but
We'll find out.
You can allude to it.
Okay, you have worked with John Forte recently, right? Now you also have worked with Wyclef Jean, and you tell this story about how you met Wyclef Jean and how it led to you working with him. Can you share that? And sort of John Forte is involved in that, but I'll let you decide how much of that you want to share. But
Okay.
can you share the Wyclef story?
Yeah, absolutely. This story goes back 20 years. And when the conclusion to this story is ready, it's going to feel like that the movie about the magicians where the thing is put in the tree and 20 years goes by and then it looks like this thing comes out fully formed, but it really goes back that far. So when I was a kid, I wrote a letter, literally to the Fugees, care of Columbia Records, and sent it off in response to a lyric. And Wyclef actually called me in response to this letter, which, for kids of the internet era, don't understand how impossible that is. Like, this was a physical letter I mailed off to the main address.
Your story is a story of ambition and relationships. That's what I said at the time.
I mean, listen, and
I'm not going to stop, Miss Hill. Wyclef, I'm writing you this letter,
Right.
and I'm getting a response. Like,
yeah, and that's true. I think the part I didn't expect was that it would have an effect on him. So what ends up happening is there's this relationship that develops where other people see him and remind him of the story, and he gives them artifacts. Like, I have his backstage pass, over there from the House of Blues tour. I end up sort of eventually through DJ Scribble, who sort of took me to get my first set of turntables.
shout out to Scribble, man.
Shout out to Scribble. I end up getting an opportunity to meet Wyclef and sort of say to him, I'm that kid. But this is sort of predates J.Period. So what ends up happening is that at the Roots Grammy Jam last year, I see him, and now he knows about the Lauryn Hill mixtape. He knows me as J.Period. And I say, look, do you remember this kid who wrote you this letter? And he's like, oh my God, I'll never forget that as long as I live. And so I proposed to him this idea that for my album, we kind of tell that story. And so that's what we've been working on. And, what was incredible was that when John Forte heard it, it inspired him to tell his story. And, in some ways, that's the mission of what this whole album is about. It's sort of like inspiring people to tell their story in that way. So I was, humbled, honored for John to say, look, can I use this forum to tell my story? Because I know his story, like you know his story. And it's an incredible story. So, what eventually is going to happen is that there will be, the conclusion to that story plays out on chapter 3 of my album. And also a new chapter that involves John Forte, where we're kind of retracing the lines of how I got here, how he got here. And, it's amazing. It's an amazing one. So, but I did tell the story on Twitter, and it became a Mashable article and all this stuff. So it's an incredible ride on that one.
That's amazing, because these days we get excited if we get a retweet, and that's nowhere near an actual. Was it? When was that? Did it have the rotary phone? Just kidding.
Well, what's also, not to give away too much, but what's really amazing is there's a younger artist who has a similar story from the digital era with Black Thought. And so that also will find its way onto chapter 3 of my album. It's another kind of continuation of this idea of just sort of reaching out beyond your capabilities and finding how far that just the reaching can get you.
Yeah.
Yes, and Black Thought, you have such a strong relationship with Black Thought. When we had Questlove on, he talked about how thrilled he was for the response to the Funk Flex cipher and the career renaissance that came out of that. What can you tell us about how you two built that friendship? And what don't people, even people that claim to know Black Thought, huge Black Thought fans, what do they not know?
Well, maybe I'll answer the second part first, because I told this story after the Hot 97, after the Hot 97 freestyle. I told the story that Tariq told me of how, people were in awe of his ability to rap for 10 straight minutes like that at all, like physically. So there were a lot of amazing things happening. One was, his ability to sort of move in the moment and freestyle. The other was his breath control. So the story that he told me was that he went to a performing arts high school, and in a speech class, they would make the students lay on their back and put a heavy encyclopedia on their chest. And they would train them to breathe, and they would learn sort of circular breathing like a saxophone player with this heavy weight. And it literally physically strengthened the muscles in his chest. So it's like when people talk about Tariq's ability to have a consistent vocal tone for 45 minutes on stage with the Roots, it's because he physically strengthened his body, like to make it possible to do that. So that right there tells you everything you need to know about the work ethic of Black Thought. With me and Tariq, it's two parts. Part one is when I do the Roots mixtape, and he hasn't slept for 3 weeks, and somehow or another I get him to do 7 or 8 freestyles for that mixtape. And that was the thing I think Questlove was most impressed by, because he had no idea how I actually got him to do that. And I think the story of my relationship with Tariq is in a lot of ways the story of my relationship with hip hop. It's tenacity. It's sort of like it takes a lot to earn the respect of Tariq Trotter. And, every day I show up like my job is on the line. Like, I want to earn that slot every day. I feel I have a responsibility to do that. So, I prepare like nothing when I'm going to go do a show with him. There's a moment at the Shack a couple weeks ago where Dave had Kweli and Pharoah Monch and all these MCs in there, and he decides in the moment, okay, J.Period, we're not going to just do a DJ set. I'm going to call out, and you're going to change the beat on cue. And, we're going to go through freestyles, and everyone's looking at me like, oh my God, are you scared? And I was like, you guys have no idea. I've been training for this for 10 years with Tariq Trotter. Right. Because that's what it is to rock with the Roots. It's like the plan changes in a second's notice, and you got to be ready. And, rocking with Tariq is the best boot camp you could possibly have as a DJ, because it just trains you to, be ready at all times for anything. So shout out to that man. Sort of, for me, my boot camp has been, he is the standard bearer in hip hop. I think increasingly every year that goes by, more and more. So for me to be able to live up to that, I feel like I'm ready for anything. So, shouts to Tariq Trotter for that.
And there probably won't be any other Black Thoughts, because I'm pretty sure it's illegal to put encyclopedias on a child's chest these days.
I mean, they were in high school, but
I don't know.
Definitely shout out to Black Thought and all the Roots.
Yes, no doubt.
I used to go to these Prince after parties at wherever he was staying back in the day. And a Prince jam session at his spot was never, it was very carefully manicured. You would think that the band is just jamming, but no, Prince has laid out, these are the jams we're going to play tonight.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know that. I thought they were just kind of just going with the flow. Prince asked me to come down and rap. So I'm rapping. Remember, CeeLo Green was singing and rapping, and I came on stage, and they were doing "Come Together" by the Beatles, which is a song that I know, but I don't know, And doom 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 doom,
come together,
doom 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 doom. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna freestyle. That's what a rapper does in this situation. And I start rhyming a freestyle, and I do a verse, and I was very happy with my freestyle. And then Prince looks at me after it's done, and he goes, he comes in my ear, he goes, sing the words. And I'm like, I don't know the words to come together. He goes, look down. And he had the words to the song taped to the floor.
Yes.
And so I had sang the verse, right?
Wow.
And so that's like my come together story.
Yes.
Wow.
You did your own version of Come Together.
Yes.
Speaking of Black Thought, that has Black Thought on it, starts with a Malcolm X sample. It was hard for me to feel like I was taking on the Beatles as a rapper. Did you feel like you needed to reach? And it's not the first. I mean, I did Lonely People over. I
One
did
of my favorites.
Eleanor Rigby is a sample for that.
Mm-hmm.
I got denied by Paul McCartney. Ja Rule got to put out his version of that sample, which I'm still mad about because my version was better than Ja Rule's. Sorry, Ja Rule. Every rapper's supposed to think they shit is the best. Did you feel like you needed to reach a certain level before you could take on the Beatles like that?
You know, to be honest, I felt like that probably more when I was doing the Bob Dylan stuff for Kanon, because my father was a folk musician, and so I felt like I held that up at a high level. To me, Come Together was just one of my favorite songs. Like, I grew up with that song. I had a relationship with that song. I felt like the message of that song aligned really well with that Malcolm X quote that I had at the top of it. I don't remember specifically the quote. But essentially, you know, I think that the greater the challenge, the more I'm excited by it, musically and otherwise. So, you know, yes, the short answer is for sure. I felt intimidated by trying to touch things like that. And you know, I think there's certain artists, even like if I were to try to remix Prince, I would feel a certain type of way about it. There's certain things that you leave alone. You know, I've gotten my hands on some Michael Jackson stems and gone in and played with that. And I think what it is you feel the weight of it. You feel like the history behind that record. And that's what I'm striving for, you know, is to create things that transcend history and generations. You know, I'm always pulling from the past and trying to make a new version. So I looked at it like that. It wasn't that I was intimidated by it. It was that here's this thing that's so important to a whole generation. How can we make that important to a new generation? And that's kind of what I'm trying to do in a lot of my work, I think.
Yeah, I think you did that very well. Well, not generation wise, but maybe genre wise with the Hamilton mixtape. I was somebody who, as an MC, blown away by Lin-Manuel with In the Heights. It's very hard to present hip hop in a Broadway setting. Very hard to do. I saw the Tupac play. Very hard to do. You know what I'm saying? It's not easy, which is why those hip hop plays don't last. Lin-Manuel Miranda fucking nailed it with Hamilton.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard the story of how he used to be bullied by a Motor Technique in high school?
No.
Yeah, they went to the same high school together, and apparently a Motor Technique used to bully Lin-Manuel, which I feel like is a metaphor for society today. but you did the Hamilton mixtape, which may be one of the biggest mixtapes of all time. Lin always said he based Hercules Mulligan on Busta Rhymes. You got Busta the Rap as Hercules. Nas, Chance the Rapper, Wiz, Common, The Roots. Talk to us a little bit about putting that together.
I mean, you know, the amazing part of that story is when they first approached me, it was before Hamilton was, you know, Hamilton. And it was J.Period, can you take the cast recordings and remix it with beats and try to make this appeal to a hip hop audience? So shout out to Riggs Morales and Saul Guy, who sort of brought me in the beginning. So my first demo was taking 10 dual commandments and flipping it over Biggie 10 crack commandments. And that's what I presented. And they were like, we love it. Then over the arc of the next 10 months, Hamilton becomes Hamilton. And when it comes back to me, it's Questlove inviting me to Electric Lady Studios and basically hands me the phone, and on FaceTime is Lin-Manuel Miranda. And he's like, okay, you guys go figure it out. So it was sort of like I'd earned his Amir, you know, Questlove, I'd earned his trust over the course of many years. So he felt like, okay, J.Period is the guy for this. You guys go figure it out. You know, at that point, I had watched Hamilton. I had listened to the soundtrack. I really was, like you, totally in awe of the whole thing. And even seeing how much Black Thought was in awe of Lin as an MC gave me a hint to what the level was. And, you know, what it really ended up being was that the record label had one idea of what the mixtape should be. Lin, I think, was in the narrative of the play. And I came to it from a mixtape perspective, like, yo, we got to flip this around and let me take a stab at it. but I knew that it wasn't going to work if I just explained it. So I sat in the corner of Electric Lady for 10 hours and I made this demo and I sent it at 4 a.m. I sent it to Riggs Morales, and by noon the following day, they were like, "Okay, new plan. This is the plan." And that blueprint, 90% of that ended up becoming the Hamilton mixtape as it was presented to the world. So, Lynn and the Roots and all these guys played an instrumental role in getting all these artists to come to the table. They had all fallen in love with Hamilton by then. And it was my job to weave it together, fill in the gaps, add some elements and make it into an experience like a real mixtape. And the result, is, up there is, the first of those I ever got. And so shout to Lin-Manuel for, having sort of the faith in me, and a Questlove, for having the faith in me to pull that one off. But that was an incredible experience.
You worked closely with Masego on the new album. What was your working relationship?
I mean, I love Masego. He's one of my favorite young artists. I met him again through Jazzy Jeff and the Playlist Retreat. Masego was in this very room, in my studio at home when I played him A Tribe Called Quest for the first time.
Wait, hold on. You're saying that you played Masego Tribe Called Quest for the first time?
That's true, I did.
How old is he?
He's young. He's maybe 20. Now he's maybe like 24, 25. So then he was maybe 19, 20.
Okay.
But
Thank
Masego's...
you, J.Period. Thank you. I
feel like these things should be like this should be like materials that you need to do in order to be in the industry.
Listen, it's all the stories of the making of this project. But Masego came here. I just love his whole energy as an artist. And the story of that song was really sort of hilarious. There's a basketball court at Jazzy Jeff's house, and everyone would gather around and play hoops, during the Playlist Retreat. So Masego, no one knows, but he was on track to be like a college ball player. And he tore his ACL, I think it was, and in the hospital he picked up a saxophone and started playing. Wow. So he was on track to be a basketball player, and Masego was challenging a lot of dudes out there on the court and beating a lot of dudes. And Masego, I love him to death, but he made the mistake of challenging me on the basketball court. And so, a couple games later, when I had beaten Masego, he's like, it was horse. So, he's complaining about the trick shots. I'm shooting over the backboard and doing all kind of stuff. And the following day I wake up and Masego comes over to me. He's like, yo, I wrote a song about you beating me in horse.
So that's why his verse, okay.
The whole thing is Masego is basically getting at me. The whole song is him basically trash talking me. And so I was like, well, shoot, I can't respond in rhyme. Who's the funniest, illest, smartest MC I can get? I was like, boom, let's get Shad from Toronto. Right. And so Shad becomes my response to Masego on that record. And it turned into such a fun record. I did like the Howard Cosell courtside reporter. And then Jamel Hill came in and we made it like it was this legendary game that that never happened. But shouts to Masego. He's turned out to be, I think, one of the most incredible young artists in the game right now. And I love him, and I'm excited that he's on the album as well.
Yeah, I went to a couple of years ago. I went to an Ari Lennox show in L.A. I hadn't heard Ari Lennox music outside of Shea Butter Baby at that point. So I didn't know what she looked like. I didn't know what I was walking into. And I was blown away by this show. I was like, oh, I feel like I'm at like a Bilal Mos Def show from 20 years ago. The things she's talking about, the musical choices, the way the audience looks. I'm like, this is oddly familiar. Why don't I know about this artist? You know what I'm saying? And then she's like, I want to introduce you to my friend Masego. And this kid comes on stage and he does the saxophone thing. And I'm like, oh, is this what we're doing now? Because, I'm like, I thought everything was, I didn't understand that she had a huge following at that point. She had already developed and when Masego came out, the audience lost their shit. They were like, whoa, it's Masego. I hadn't heard of him. And I'm like, you mean to tell me that there are young Black artists who are doing music that feels familiar to me, who can fill a theater like this and the featured artist plays saxophone? I was highly impressed. And then when you said that he had never heard Tropical Quest before, he has a song. I like that. Of course, I like that Tadao record. He has
Yeah.
record blew the fuck up. But he has another record that I don't know the name of it, but he's rapping about how cool it is that he's a jazz musician and how cool jazz music is. And it's a bold choice, but that record feels like someone who's a fan of Tribe Called Quest. So when you said you played it from the first time, I'm like, oh, okay. But I mean, I get he's young and he probably comes from a different background.
Well, he's also an old soul. You got to understand, when I met Masego and he's 19 or 20, and I asked him his favorite artist, he said Cab Calloway, and he was
that
dead
makes
serious.
sense. That makes sense because that record feels like a record from that era, or at least he's trying to pay tribute to that era, and that jazzy song that he made.
Yeah, and if you listen on some of those early records, he does the hottie, hottie, hottie. It's like a little, almost like a drop that he uses.
Cab Calloway is an MC, and that song Minnie the Moocher is about a prostitute.
Minnie the Moocher.
Here's a story about Minnie the Moocher. She was a low down hoochie coocher.
That's the joint in the Blues Brothers that everybody. That's the
hottie,
great,
hottie, hottie, high.
Yeah.
Hody, 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 ho.
You know, Talib, I actually failed jazz history twice. And not because I wasn't paying attention, it's because I didn't go to the class. But that's one of like the things that I regret the most about school, because it's like, how many places you get to learn so much about music. And they really sat there. He would like play the record and like give all these stories and stuff about it because he used to be in the industry. And now doing this podcast, I'm like, damn, I wish I would have not skipped that class.
Yeah.
And I learned about jazz records by flipping over Tribe Called Quest records.
Which a lot of us did. I mean, I had a leg up, an inside track, because my father collected a lot of albums. But turning that Tribe Called Quest records and other artists, Gangstar and Pete Rock and them, but especially Tribe Called Quest, I was able to be like, oh, okay, and go into my father's collection and be like, okay, this is that record. You know what I'm saying?
That's
so
dope.
It connected me to my father's jazz collection.
Your own crating.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I got, I think, a lot of different influences from my folks, from my sister, and I came up at a moment where when I discovered hip hop, it became this umbrella. So one of the things I've done in my career is I bring in all these other genres that were familiar to me that I feel like work as hip hop. So like I said, I flipped, Bob Dylan, the Beatles, those kinds of things.
That's the beauty of hip hop, though.
Yeah.
Hip hop. If you're a hip hop DJ, you have to know every genre
For
to
sure.
be a consummate hip hop DJ. And hip hop is if you know hip hop, you know all music.
I always say, sorry to interrupt you, I always
No,
say
please.
hip hop is like an umbrella genre in that it encompasses all these other genres and you can bring them in. I think it's one of the reasons why hip hop has become this global phenomenon, because there's a point of entry, no matter what culture, what style, there's a version of that can exist as hip hop. And I think it's why you see people all over the world, embracing hip hop culture.
Now, speaking of what you just said, I'm a fan of Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. I'm a fan of that style of rock and roll. Neil Young wrote a song called Ohio Machine Gun, which I discovered, I didn't know this song, this summer when I was in Ohio in Yellow Springs. It came up like on a playlist or somebody was playing it. And I'm like, oh, that song is funky. That shit is dope. And it's like, it became my theme song for my time in Ohio.
Wow.
And then when I was like listening to your music, because you put out, you're so prolific. I didn't know every single J.Period thing. I come across this song, Soldiers, with Dead Prez, Sa Rock, who's incredible, Mumu Fresh, incredible. And that song samples the Isley Brothers version of Ohio Machine Gun. So how did you connect with that record?
Man, well, it's it's a fascinating story. I mean, for me personally, I connected with it because my father, like I said, my father was a folk musician and I heard Crosby, Stills and Nash growing up. So I knew Ohio. I also knew, because my folks were sort of, in some ways politically active, back then, what the song was about. And it was about
the Kent
State massacre.
Yeah.
So what's really interesting about the Isley's version is that apparently there was another massacre where kids got killed at a historically black college.
And Isleys are from Ohio, that Cincinnati area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Crosby, Stills, and Nash wrote Ohio about the Kent State massacre, but this other story that happened in the news was overlooked, and it was where 3 black kids got killed at it was either historically black college or a university in the South. And the Isley brothers decided to take the Crosby, Stills and Nash version, combine it with this Jimi Hendrix song Machine Gun, and play it live as a tribute to that other story, which didn't get the press. So, you know, when I was working on Rise Up, I had this ill idea of taking that and somehow flipping it and making it an anthem. So instead of 4 Dead in Ohio, it's 4 Dead in Oakland, in, you know, all of the places that we've seen things happen. And I pitched it to Dead Prez, and they loved the idea. Mumu Fresh, who sings on the record, and Sa Rock. But the amazing part about this was Neil Young doesn't clear samples ever.
Right.
And because of the project that we were working on, and it was for charity, he actually cleared that sample. So we were able to release that record, and there's this incredible layered history to that song. I think it's ill that you just, you know, you discovered that in a playlist randomly. And then it opens up to this whole world of stories.
Yeah, I confused the name, because the original song, like you said, is Ohio.
Yeah, it's Ohio.
And my notes say Ohio Machine Gun, but that's, I discovered the song Ohio first. Then I heard your version. Then I went back and heard Ohio Machine Gun by the Isley Brothers.
Yeah, and if you listen, they did that deliberately. So they combined Crosby, Stills and Nash, you know, obviously sort of white songwriter, with Jimi Hendrix, black songwriter, as a way of showing this. There's a point of connection here between these stories, and that they're not two different kinds of things. They really go together. So, you know, shout to the Isley Brothers for that one. Yeah,
shout out to the Isley Brothers, who have definitely been making their marks on social media after that Versus.
Oh yes. I got another round of run for my Isley Brothers mixtape after that.
Yeah, right.
Oh, I was talking about the ladies, but
you need a white beard. You get that white beard, you just get it right.
That white beard was hitting. You got. I never thought that I would think about dating an older man, but you know, in that situation, it wouldn't be that hard to be a sugar baby.
Wait, I gotta get on my Kevin Samuels now. Well, see, if you're looking for a high value man, you're gonna need an older man, sister, because an older man is the man that.
No,
I'm sorry, that shit is funny to me. I don't agree with things that Kevin said because I know they're gonna come at me anyway. That shit is just.
They're gonna come at you regardless.
Hilarious.
And I was about to go even further, but I think I'm going to save that for off camera because
okay.
It's very inappropriate what I was about to say. It involves a blue pill. Anyway, Yellow Spring Sessions, which I'm still kind of hating that I did not get to go to Ohio at all. And I love my daughter, but I'm going to forever hold this over her head. Or what we've been calling Chappelle Summer Camp is starting to get a mythic reputation as more and more work comes out of that collective. Can you tell me about the environment out there during quarantine and how Dave created a safe space for artists to experiment and collaborate?
Wow, you know, it's funny. I've told Dave and I've told Jazzy Jeff that there's something about the energy of what both of those guys are doing that feels similar because they're putting amazing people together and allowing them to collaborate organically. You know, I think what Dave did has another component because it's during the pandemic when we're all so isolated. So, you know, I was skeptical myself. I saw Kweli and all the photos and I was looking at it like, what is going on out there? and then, you know, Questlove, I was on the phone with Mikkel, shout out Mikkel, and Questlove jumps on the line and says, J.Period, you got to come out here. It's safe. There's kids out here. There's families. And literally took a leap of faith. You know, wife and kids in the car, drove 9 hours to Yellow Springs, which Black Thought immortalizes on, you know, the All in Your Head single. And I just was amazed by what I saw. It was sort of like the world had turned back to normal in this little bubble. And then, you know, you have the artists that are there and everyone is feeling the same thing because we've all been cooped up for so long. So it just became this sort of like breeding ground for awesome collaborations and ideas. And, you know, you're having all sorts of fascinating conversations. And then, you know, I had a post that I put up after Dave did Saturday Night Live where I was saying, you know, props to the artists who are brave enough to walk directly into the fire. And you know, there's so few who are willing to risk their career, their reputation, to do the right thing sort of in that way. And Dave, I've never seen anything like it, you know, where he sort of is such a principled and smart guy that, you know, to him, this all made perfect sense in his mind. And you've seen it turn into this thing in reality that makes all the sense in the world. And it's just amazing environment out there. You know, I can't wait to go back out. to Yellow Springs, and whenever I get a chance, I feel blessed to be in that kind of creative environment.
Yeah, I want to shout out Jazzy Jeff definitely because his name has come up several times in your story, and he's such an important, integral part of the culture. He's an inventor in the culture. He's an architect. He's achieved the highest of heights, but even at the highest of heights, he always brought other artists up with him. The playlist retreat sounds like that. Please tell him he has to come do the show.
Absolutely.
He's one of my favorite people.
Yeah, and I think, to me, Jeff and Dave are visionaries in a similar kind of sense. They've been to the mountaintop. They've seen and done absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, they, I don't know, realized or just sort of, whether it was always there, this idea of bringing other artists along. And I think, Jeff's done that a few times in his career, with Touch of Jazz and so forth. But this time feels much more free and open. The people that he feels are good people, trailblazers, those are the people that he selects. I feel like it's similar with Dave. The people that are there are each really unique perspectives. And so the conversation, whether, for the miracle or just in the room that's generated, is kind of life altering for the people that are there. It's really inspiring.
Yeah, and I can't wait for people to hear your contributions to the Midnight Miracle because they're stellar, brother, and I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I cannot wait either.
Yeah, word. Now, I didn't realize your love for basketball until I heard the song with Masego, and I didn't realize that you're like a shit talker until today.
Only on the basketball court. That's
yes, on the basketball court.
Only on the basketball court.
You were the music supervisor at the Barclays Center, reinventing the sound of the Nets. Your work has been widely regarded as a bold new step for music in basketball arenas. I'm not someone who follows sports, but for the sports fans, which I'm learning, you're a huge basketball fan, what do you feel are the Nets' chances in the playoffs? Can this new roster win it all?
Wow. It's really exciting. I think, when I was there every day, they were sort of trying to figure out what the lineup could be that could turn Brooklyn into New York's team. Obviously, the Knicks have a diehard, long-running fan base.
Of
not winning. Oh, sorry.
That's true.
And I mean, this year they're actually doing pretty well. Yeah. I think that those first few years were figuring out of what it could be like to have a real powerhouse in Brooklyn. And it's been amazing to watch this year. I just saw a highlight this morning of this like Blake Griffin behind the back, like off the backboard alley-oop. I'm like, this is like the Lakers Showtime all over again. So I'm excited. I mean, I think that, Brooklyn fans, you can say this definitively, Kweli, like Brooklyn fans are the best fans of anything.
Absolutely.
Anywhere you go in the world is, you shout Brooklyn in the house.
Brooklyn fans still rep the Dodgers.
Exactly.
Like they was like, that's a Brooklyn team.
Right. So I think to have Brooklyn rooting on a team like the Nets now is just awesome to watch. And, I think they're still running some of the pieces that I made for the Nets in the arena. So, it's been awesome to watch.
No doubt.
And shout out my birthday twin, Kevin Durant.
Oh, yes.
On
no
the
doubt.
Nets.
Shouts to KD.
Shout outs to KD. We had Michael Rappaport up. We got to get KD up next.
Please, because listen, when I seen that, I was like, leave my twin alone, Michael Rappaport. Simmer down.
Yeah. Speaking of people that like to talk smack, you and Rappaport together is a dangerous combination.
Me and Talib. Talib and Rappaport.
No, not you, Jazz. Kweli.
Did you see Michael on People's Party?
I did see him on People's Party.
Yeah, it's a very funny episode.
Sips tea.
J.Period, thank you for your time. Thank you for your work. It's been wonderful talking to you. I do have one more question before we let you get out of here. Who are your 5 favorite DJs and 5 favorite producers?
Oh, wow.
I want to compare the list.
5 favorite DJs and 5 favorite producers. That's a tough one. Some of those might be overlap.
Okay.
So start with DJs. I got to put Jazzy Jeff at the top of the list to this day.
Also a producer.
Yes, also a producer. Pete Rock.
Let's go back.
Okay.
As you start this list, every single DJ you mention is going to be a producer.
Probably
because
true.
the next logical step for hip hop producers is to make beats. So that's a caveat. That's like
maybe we should do producers first then.
Yeah.
So all right. So we'll say producers. I mean, again, there's going to be a couple of overlap, but I think Q-Tip has to be for sure.
What a great DJ he is.
and what a great DJ he is.
Keep going.
I mean, Premier again, and what a great DJ he is. Pete Rock, another one of my favorite producers. I would say, going back to sort of influences, I got to say Prince Paul. Like in those early years, the way he would weave the stories into
that makes sense that you would be influenced by Me, Myself, and I, and Prince Among Thieves.
Yeah, absolutely. And man, in terms of all-time favorite producers, I gotta go probably with Mobb Deep,
Right.
like with Havoc, and
Havoc.
I mean, Havoc did most of that, obviously.
Havoc is the only one on that list that I don't. And Havoc, I might be ignorant here. We need to get Havoc on the show. That's somebody we need to get on the show. I have never seen a Havoc DJ set.
I've never seen Havoc DJ.
Yeah, the rest of those people, I've seen them DJ multiple times. Pete Rock, Premier, Q-Tip, of course. But Havoc is the only one that wasn't like completely overlap.
So my favorite DJs, I would have to say Jeff, in terms of like, technically and just rocking a party. Rich Medina is one of my favorite DJs. Like I feel
you're partial to them Philly boys.
Well, Rich knows about things that I don't know about musically, and so it's still a place where I can discover when I listen to Rich, which I always appreciate.
That's also what I like about Rich Medina is that if you go to a Rich Medina party, you're not going to sing along. You're going to dance first because he's dancing. Like you're going to dance. You're going to dance and you're going to learn.
And you know what? I'll add to that. One of the DJs who really inspired me when I first came to New York was Bobbito.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Bobbito, I think before I was technically proficient on turntables and I was still doubting myself, I would go, I saw Bobbito, and it wasn't that he was like
an APT or something.
Yeah, at APT, it wasn't like he was juggling records or scratching, but his selections were just outrageous.
That's the lane I'm in.
Yeah,
I'm in the selector lane.
I mean, listen, and that's a legit lane because I think that was the first step. Before I knew how to work turntables and I had CDs and I was just playing song after song, I was a selector. So I think that's the most important skill you can have. There's lots of technically proficient DJs, but there aren't that many who really know the right mood for the party at the right time. And let's say I got one more DJ. I probably would add Clark Kent, God's favorite. Yeah, Clark is also one of my favorites as a DJ, and guys, again, we're like, there's just always some jewels in that set that I don't know, and I'm still the type of person who wants to be in the room with people that know more than me, so I can learn. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, the People's Party is proud to present J.Period, A Story to Tell. Part 1 is out now. Look for the rest of the parts. J.Period, thank you for your time and your energy, brother.
Yes, indeed. Thank you guys so much for letting me tell my story, and I appreciate you very much.